SpaceX flew the most demanding Starship mission yet, deployed 20 real satellites for the first time, and then watched the ship do something no Starship has ever done: survive its own splashdown. Over in India, a rocket built by a company that didn't exist just 8 years ago managed to reach orbit, making India the third country on Earth with a purely private orbital launch industry. And 48 light years away, astronomers confirmed the first atmosphere ever found on a rocky planet in another star's habitable zone. My name is Connor, and after a long break, welcome to another amazing episode of Spaceflight News. Let's start with the flight, because for the first time in a long while, a Starship test flight ended with a long list of things that worked. It didn't begin that way. On the 16th of July, the countdown reached 0. The engines began to spin up, and then nothing. 4 of the 33 Raptor engines failed to reach acceptable starting conditions, and the computer shut everything down. On Friday, the 24th, it finally flew. 33 Raptor engines lit, and a stack the height of a 40-story building climbed away from Starbase on more than twice the liftoff thrust of the Saturn V. This ascent was designed to hurt. SpaceX drove the vehicle through higher dynamic pressure than any Starship before it. 1 minute in was already 200 kilometers an hour faster than Flight 12. And by 90 seconds, that gap had doubled. New load sensing tiles rode along to measure the stress, not only on the shield, but on the pins holding it there. Then the moment everyone was waiting for came at separation. On Flight 12, hot staging sent Super Heavy tumbling almost 90 degrees the wrong way. SpaceX rewrote the engine startup sequence to make the flip predictable. Vacuum Raptors first, then the sea level engines, kicking the ship upward. And it worked. The booster flipped exactly where it should have and relit all 33 engines for the most aggressive boostback Super Heavy has ever flown. Then it fell home, aft first, with no entry burn at all, steering on 3 enormous grid fins through hypersonic phase. All of that looked good, and then the landing burn happened. 13 engines were meant to light. 10 did, then 2 shut down within seconds, and by the time it reached the water, it was down to just 5. It hit hard and it was lost. It's the biggest mark on this mission, and it's the thing that now changes what the next flight will look like. But meanwhile, during this flight, Ship 40 was having the best day any Starship has had. All 6 engines burned to completion, and the payload bay opened on something Starship has never carried. Not math simulators, 20 production-grade Starlink version 3 satellites. This was the point of the whole mission. They extended solar arrays, deployed antennas, fired thrusters, and linked into the existing constellation of more than 10,000 satellites over radio and laser. All of it worked, and then as planned, they burned up. And 6 of them had a second job. Cameras pointed backwards, right at Starship, to inspect the vehicle that had just released them. This was happening over the night side of the planet, so the satellites lit the ship up themselves with onboard spotlights. It's a modern echo of the space shuttle pitching over beneath the space station to have its belly photographed, except with no crew and no station. And before the flight, SpaceX painted a few black tiles white, faking damage to see whether the system would catch flaws nobody told it about. With the bay closed, Ship 40 relit a single Raptor in space for about 14 seconds. That may sound minor, but it is really not. Restarting an engine in vacuum is what makes a controlled deorbit even possible, and it was the last box to tick before flying a genuinely orbital mission instead of just a very, very fast arc. Then re-entry at roughly 8 kilometers per second, followed by the aggressive banking maneuver and the overshoot and turn back approach that it will one day use to line up on the tower. The engines lit, the flip was clean, and the Starship set down on the Indian Ocean in what SpaceX called its softest splashdown yet. And then it stayed there. Every previous ship has toppled over and exploded. This one floated, still transmitting, engine bay cameras still running, drones circling as a stainless steel spacecraft lying intact right in the middle of the water. A few cracked tiles, that was the extent of it. Within hours, Elon Musk said that unless the data review turns up problems, SpaceX will try to catch the ship with the tower on the very next flight. The first recovery of an orbital class upper stage that way, and far harder than catching just a booster. Booster 21 has already finished cryogenic testing, and Ship 41 is receiving its engines, as Flight 14 is expected to go fully orbital. The open question is the booster. After that landing burn, another Super Heavy catch attempt is not the obvious next step. And now over to our friends in India. From the largest rocket ever built, to one you could fit in a selfie frame. On the 18th of July, a 4-stage vehicle about 20 meters tall lifted off from Sriharikota and reached a 450-kilometer orbit 15 minutes later. The rocket was the Vikram 1. The mission was called Agaman, Sanskrit for arrival, and it made Skyroot Aerospace the first private Indian company ever to reach orbit. Skyroot was founded in Hyderabad in 2018 by 2 former ISRO engineers, 2 years before India opened its private space sector to companies at all. Their rocket has an all-carbon composite structure and 3D printed engines, and lifts 350 kilograms. But the detail that makes this more than a milestone is who helped. ISRO supplied the pad, the test facilities, the trajectory analysis, and the integration. A national space agency deliberately building up a company that will one day compete with it. Vikram 2 is now targeted for 2027. Staying with companies building ahead of their rockets, at the Farnborough Air Show on the 21st of July, Relativity Space announced a second Terran R factory, this one on Florida's Space Coast, with up to $134 million in state financing and thousands of jobs promised by 2034. The logistics explains all of it. Relativity recently shipped a Terran R second stage from Long Beach to Mississippi for testing, by sea, through the Panama Canal. Building in Florida means building next to the launch site. Terran R is an 86-meter, partially reusable rocket that has not yet even flown, and Launch Complex 16 at Cape Canaveral is still being prepared for its first flight. Building a second factory before the launch is a bet on one idea. The hard part is not reaching orbit once, it's reaching it repeatedly and often. And finally, the story that might still matter in 50 years. 48 light-years away, a red dwarf called LHS 1140 has a planet, a super-Earth around 5.5 times our mass, orbiting every 25 days, squarely in the sun's habitable zone. Exoplanet science has had a particular hole in the middle of it for the last 20 years. We can find rocky planets at the right distance from their star, but nobody could confirm whether any had or held on to any atmosphere. Red dwarfs flood their planets with radiation, and an airless rock at the right temperature is still an airless rock. But on the 16th of July, a Harvard-led team published in Science that they had found helium escaping from LHS 1140b, which sounds backwards. Evidence of an atmosphere is gas leaving? But helium is light. It rises to the top and sometimes it leaks away. As control, the sibling planet LHS 1140c crossed the same star at the same night and showed nothing. This is not life. It's not even water. And the helium appeared in 2024, but was gone when they looked again in 2025. So the escape seems to come and go. What it does mean is that a rocky world in a habitable zone has held onto its air for 3 billion years. 20 years ago, we did not definitively know that worlds like this existed. Now, we know one is still breathing. That's it this week. A ship that came home in one piece, a rocket that changed India's space industry forever, and a planet with air on it 48 light years away. Thank you so much for watching, and hopefully, we'll see you next week.